The Newfoundland and Labrador SPOR Support Unit, also referred to as the NL Support Unit, works to improve outcomes for patients by supporting research that has direct impacts on patient lives in ways that are important to patients by making them partners in research. The Patient Advisory Council consists of patient research partners as valuable members of health research teams whose lived experiences and personal healthcare journeys bring important perspectives to the table, helping to identify research priorities, write grant proposals, and work together throughout the continuum of the research cycle. This is episode 27 of PEP Talks, the Patient Engagement Podcast. In this episode, recorded in the summer of 2020, we speak with Mike Warren, a patient and family partner for the NL Support Unit, and Holly Etchegary, the patient engagement academic lead for the NL Support Unit and a health services researcher at the University of Newfoundland. Paul Ferry first asked Holly and Mike how they first got involved in the world of patient engagement and patient-oriented research.
I'm a faculty member in the Faculty of Medicine here in Memorial University, and I was around, one of the few faculty around at the time when SPOR was being introduced and the applications were out for the support units. So at the time, and today, in fact, my research has always revolved around inherited disorders and talking to patients and families who are affected by genetic conditions. I also had an interest in what the public understood or knew about inherited risk and genetic disorders. And so coincidentally enough, just a few years before SPOR really came online, I was doing some talks, some sort of public engagement sessions around the province here in Newfoundland. So myself and one of the great geneticists here, Jane Green, we had went around Newfoundland and gave talks about the research we were doing, and we asked for opinions. So we asked patients and families and members of the public, what do you think about this research? And is there anything else you'd like to see us do? So we were kind of doing a little bit of patient and public engagement without really calling it that, I think, at the time. And so when the SPOR, when the strategy was released, I was asked by some of our lead folks here if I'd be interested in helping to write our strategy, because I knew a little bit about that literature, sort of community engagement. And so that's how I became involved. I was kind of an obvious faculty person at the time who knew a little bit and could contribute a little bit. So I was around from the beginning really and helped write our strategy.
Interesting. Mike?
Yeah, hi Paul. Thanks for inviting me.
Happy to.
My background is actually, I'm retired now, but I was in the government of Newfoundland and Labrador in policy and planning and development programs. Nothing to do with healthcare, but in the fisheries and aquaculture department. And after I was retired for a couple of years, I did most of the things that I wanted to do in a retirement, building decks and all that kind of thing. I wanted to engage in something that was important to me and was relevant. It had to be relevant and important to Newfoundland and Labrador. So I saw an ad in the paper for NL support, looking for patient partners and patient advisors, and to be a member of the Patient Advisory Council with NL support. I also should mention too that I was drawn to it because it was, in a sense, it was a way of, paying back. I have a son that has cerebral palsy, and he's in his mid-30s now. But as a young parent at the time, we were, I guess, thrown into the healthcare system, and we had lots of good people helping us along the way. And so, in a way, this was, for me to give something back and learning something at the same time. I certainly have learned a lot. But that's very briefly what brings me to the Patient Advisory Council, as well as the patient engagement generally.
Interesting. So you guys were both involved recently in the publication of a paper about 2 provincial advisory councils in health research. So what maybe inspired you to launch this study?
And so I'll start there as well if I can, because really, Paul, it was me who thought, I would sit in on these patient advisory council meetings all the time and just listening to the great work and thoughts and real engagement. This is a really good group, and Mike is a great example of that, and I'm sure he'll attest to it. It's a great group. And so every meeting I would walk away thinking, you know, we really need to highlight what we're doing. So during one of those meetings, I pitched to the council the idea of a paper. And I said to them, you know, look, I don't know what this will look like. I have nothing predetermined in my mind. I just think we do good work, and we could help others who are, you know, they could learn from our work in building a council and figuring out the governance and figuring out how it runs and, you know, what the challenges have been and what works well and so on. I said, that's all I know. I know no more than that. I'm willing to work with you to write it. So is there any interest in that? And that's really how it came about. And the entire council was interested in that. So I was thinking there'd be one or two patient partners who might say, yes, I'd like to help you write that. But the entire council wanted to take part. So I thought, okay, great. Now, how am I going to work this? And so we eventually then, I pitched the idea, because there were so many of us, maybe we could do it in a bit of, so that everyone could contribute in a bit of bullet form. So come back and tell me in a table almost, what do you think the challenges are and the lessons learned and so on. So that's eventually how it got started and how everyone got involved. Alberta got involved with it then because I happened to mention this during a roundtable discussion of the National Patient Engagement Working Group. And one of my colleagues there said, oh, that sounds great. I'd like to get involved with that. Can we collaborate? So then I thought, now we have a second council. How am I going to work all this in? It all worked out really well. And so, Mike, I don't know if you recall me even mentioning that at the meeting, but that's my memory of it all those months ago, how we got started.
I do recall it. And at the time, one of the thoughts that I had, because I was asked about, the council, and, you know, how do you let people know what you're doing? We were talking about recruitment. We were talking about different things to let people, find out a little bit about the council. And one of the things that I had thought about at the time was to promote your success, to let people know. This comes from my background. Let people know what you're doing. And hopefully you're doing a lot of good stuff. And in this case, we are doing a lot of good stuff. And I remember Holly, pitching that idea. And I'm thinking, hey, that's great. Let other people know in Canada and elsewhere what the PAC is about, what it can, what the challenges are, what the successes are, and how, how do you make it work? And we had shown over the past 5 years that it can work, and it's been very successful. Mm-hmm. We thought it was a great idea for the paper.
Yeah.
So maybe let's dig into a little bit about what the Newfoundland and Labrador PAC is. So generally, what is it? What does it do? What does it involve?
That's a good one. It does lots and lots of things.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just start briefly, and then Mike, I'll get you to jump in with your perspectives as a member of that council. So when we first envisioned way back in 2014, as we were writing the strategy for our unit, we thought it would be a great idea. It was one of the key patient engagement activities and milestones that we wanted to do. It's in that very original strategy, bring together a group of hopefully diverse voices from around the province to advise the unit. Basically, first and foremost, advise us on what we are doing. So if we are supporting research, if we are funding research, if we are working with our provincial healthcare system, if we are mentoring students, et cetera, are we mentoring them, providing support, funding, et cetera, health research that matters here in Newfoundland and Labrador? So that was the very first sort of thinking behind it. We were aware that Newfoundland has a very geographically, laid out province. And so we actually posted newspaper ads in a lot of the smaller community newspapers. That's how we began to recruit, because we wanted to make sure that it wasn't just a St. John's council. Mm-hmm. St. John's, being the capital city, often many things happen here. That's where the university is located. That's where we all are, all of the unit staff. But we really wanted to try to reach out across the province. And so our thinking right at the beginning was, let's get a group of people from around the province together to advise us, to advise the unit on the things we're doing. But it's certainly evolved quite a bit, I think, since then. Mike, what do you think? Would you agree? You do a lot more now than just that.
Yeah, the council itself is it's involved in lots of things, from the idea of promoting healthcare. But I think the fundamental, I guess, idea of the council is to bring the voice of, I guess, the general public, because most of us, we've all been patients, whether you're a patient or you're a caregiver or a family member, but to bring their voice to the research that's taking place, setting priorities, reviewing proposals for funding, these kinds of things. So I think they've played a very, a valuable role in that regard.
Yeah. And the council also, Paul, it's evolved in that, so in Newfoundland, we have a couple of very large programs of research that are province-wide. One of them is the Choosing Wisely program for Newfoundland. Another is called Quality of Care. And so our support unit, our unit, and indeed our council, it really does feed heavily and advise heavily on both of those groups of big programs of research that include all of our provincial decision makers, as well as, some of our students, our researchers, our local healthcare providers, etc. They're big teams, big groups. And so the Patient Advisory Council really is the mechanism by which all of those folks, those big programs of research that are guiding some of the decisions being made around our healthcare system here, that is the mechanism by which they can access at least this group of members of the public to begin to get some feedback, some input. Everything from, for example, if a public awareness campaign about the overuse of antibiotics is going out here in the province, this council has reviewed it and provided really good input, actually, that has changed it, for example. That's one thing I remember. So the advisory council here, just because of the nature of how it's laid out and how it operates and is governed here, really does inform those big programs of research as well, which is a real benefit, I think.
Interesting. So Mike, you talked up front a little bit about, was it the newspaper ad that you mentioned at the beginning about the PAC?
Yes, it was a Saturday morning, okay. And it was in the middle of winter, and thumbing through the paper, and I had last 6 months or so, I guess before that, I was thinking about, okay, what can I do? I was living, and I told people who asked me about consulting work, no, I'm not interested because I'm living a quiet life in Mount Pearl. Yes. And so, like I said, after a couple of years of that, I said, no, I want to engage in something. And I was thumbing through the paper, and I saw this ad, and I read down through it, and I said, that's the ticket. That's the kind of stuff I'd like to be involved in. That way I can bring my patient experience, personal experience, as well as my family experience with our son, to the table to talk about these healthcare, I guess, research priorities and other issues related to healthcare, not just research, but it's the promotion of healthcare. And it's talking about the efficiency and effectiveness of healthcare. Mm-hmm. So anyway, and my background in policy and planning and proposal development, so I figured, no, this is for me. And I met the good folks at NL Support, and I knew that this was perfect fit.
It does sound like a good fit there, yeah. So now you've both been involved in this for a little while. So at least focusing on the PAC here, like, what do you think you get out of it?
Sorry, Mike, I didn't know if you were going to jump in. So for me as a researcher, Paul, I really get the benefit of hearing from a diverse group to help me sort of shape and refine what I'm doing. That can be very specific, from input on study measures or outcomes to a little more broad. The very idea of pitching the article was a broader idea, right? Mm-hmm. Oh, do you think this is a good idea? Would you like to take part? You get that benefit of the different opinions, viewpoints, and lived experience that I often don't have, for example. I mean, we all have our own lived experience, of course, but it's really important sometimes in research to hear from people who are really using the system or have lived experience of whatever it is you're studying, condition A or B or C, because it really can change what you're doing, and hopefully make it more relevant, right, to all of us. I mean, we all have a stake in a good functioning, a healthcare system. So for me as a researcher, it's just really useful to have those viewpoints all the time. And in addition, it's fun. I enjoy these folks. I enjoy our meetings. I enjoy seeing them and touching base with everyone. So you also just meet a new, interesting group of people, really, which has been quite fun as well. So I actually enjoy it quite a bit. It makes my research at times, I think, a bit more practical and hopefully relevant. And I have fun while I'm having my discussions with them all, Mike included.
Thank you. Well, for me, I like being a member of the PAC. I like the fact that we're contributing to something of real value, and healthcare is real value for everybody. And as Holly said, I also like the idea of like meeting new people with a passion for something. And these folks around the table, not only the members of the council, but the physicians who attend and seek our thoughts on ideas, research ideas, the NL support staff, the researchers like Holly, people that are truly interested in this area. And so I find it rewarding to participate with these folks.
Now, let's think about the PAC maybe in a broader sense, and think maybe about some of the successes that you think the PAC has brought, and maybe some of the challenges as well.
I think for me, certainly the success of the PAC has been we've had very low turnover of our members, so we've been able to retain it, and we've been able to increase membership over these years. And we've been doing this now a good 5 or 6 years now, whatever it's been, 5 years for sure, which I think in and of itself is a success story to retain it for that long. I think together we've created things that sometimes we were the first in Canada to do so. I think our unit was the first to co-create and then produce appreciation guidelines, for example. So I think together that those notions of co-creation and, respecting each other's opinions and lived experience have been real successes of the PAC. I think people have learned new skills, learned new things about research. I think all of us have learned and honed up, I guess, on our communication skills, because you do that, you develop that when you're building those relationships together. I talk about all the perspectives. It is an ongoing challenge, however, to make sure that you do have a diverse membership, and it's a challenge. It really is. That's a challenge across the country. I think to whoever you talk with in patient engagement, really trying to remember, we do need to have a diversity of voices, and so always paying attention to that and always having that in mind in terms of recruiting new members. And whatnot. So that's been a challenge. The other challenge, I think, is going to be sustainability. And that's, again, always a challenge, particularly when something is funded and started because of research money, which is what happened here, really, ultimately, administered through CIHR, which is, fabulous. I worry about what happens when that ends. So at the end of phase 2, which we all know is coming, which is great. So I think sustainability of such groups is also a challenge. I think that's just the nature of it.
For sure, yeah. If you solve that one, let me know, yeah.
Yeah, right?
I could add a couple of things as well.
Please, yeah.
Everything that Holly has said. But I'd add that the PAC has been sort of a center point for developing capacity within patient partners, the capacity to participate in patient-oriented research and be a patient partner on those projects. It's also, leading from that, it's also the door that leads you into direct involvement on projects, research projects. So through the PAC and through NL support, I've worked on a number of projects, research projects, some with Holly and other ones with other researchers in different parts of the country as well. And so it's been that vehicle for me to be directly involved in research, which I wanted to do.
And what about let's go back to the paper for a second and think, were there any lessons learned that you had from writing up this paper?
For sure. So I think when we all reflected, all of us, the council members from both councils, some of them become pretty easy, I think, to pick out. And one is the value of communication, having those sort of trusting relationships with each other and being transparent all the time about what we're doing and why, and what kind of input we need and why, and following up with our patient partners and so on. I think that's certainly been a lesson learned, how important that is. It's not rocket science, but it's worth restating it, I think, right? The importance of communication. I think that the notion of co-production has also been a real lesson learned for everyone. I think most of what we do, and you know, Mike, I'll see if you agree with this, I think most of what we do in the council, from developing our terms of reference to having those appreciation guidelines, has been co-produced, co-developed. So it's not just researchers or staff sort of making all the decisions and handing it out. I think we really try to work hard with our council members to create things and governance structures and policies and so on that we're all happy with. I think that's really a success, actually, of the PEP, but a lesson learned for sure on how important that is. Would you agree, Mike?
Sure. What I saw was from my first meeting, and I came a bit later. I think it was formed. I think it was 2 years before I showed up. But what I saw was that the council was empowered to. They chair the meetings. They I guess lead on organization of the agenda. They identify agenda items and speakers who come in to run their ideas by us, or to help us build our understanding of healthcare on specific projects. But one of the things that I found, also goes back to my background, is the value of a good terms of reference. A lot of time was spent up front developing the terms of reference and reviewing it each year to make sure that we're on track and we are staying to, I guess, the course that we wanted to go on. In a way of identifying projects, priority areas, leading to engagement, if people want it, directly on projects, and that sort of thing. But there's one other thing too, is that if I could offer, I guess, a suggestion of what lessons were learned, was that it's the whole idea of appreciation too. You know, I think that I know around the table that we get these recognitions of appreciation from NL Support and others. It goes a long way to knowing that your voice, your comments is appreciated and encouraged to add something to the council.
So one of the things as well I like to do on this podcast is ask people for advice. So what advice would you have for anyone who was thinking of maybe getting involved in patient-oriented research as a patient advisor or patient partner for the first time?
Good question.
Will I go first on that one?
Yes, please.
As somewhat new, considering, I think most of the folks have been around the table for 5 years, but somewhat new to the table, is that my advice would be to engage. It's not a play on the word patient engagement, but it's the fact that engage in the process. Is that in the actual council itself, be a part of the discussion, bring your ideas forward, recommend agenda items, priority areas that you're interested in, but also take the step to engage, to be, I guess, the most knowledgeable that you can be in patient-oriented research and patient engagement. So when you go working on a research project, you add value to the research, and it's recognized that you add value. And that, to me, that's critical. And that way, in the bigger picture, that researchers going forward can say, oh yes, we had this patient partner, the patient partner was great, improved the research, and it's much better. And then the next time out, they don't have to have a little nudge to get a patient partner or anything like that, but they recognize themselves that it's good to have a patient partner on the team as a member of the team and a valuable member of the team. That's my thought.
Excellent. Yeah, that's excellent, Mike. I fully agree. I think, broadly speaking, advice I would have for anyone, researchers or patient partners, is come to the idea with an open mind and flexibility in your heart. I mean, really and truly, you know, if you are a researcher like myself, you're very used to being in total control of your research project, right? You know the literature, you think about it, you write it up, off you go, you know, carry out your data collection and so on. But you do need to have an open mind to sit down with patient partners and say, well, here's some initial ideas I have, what do you think? And if they say, well, you know, this outcome measure, it doesn't really matter to us, you have to be willing and flexible to change a little bit. And patient partners do as well. If they say, oh, you know, Holly, I don't really like this, I don't know, response scale or question, I might have to say, well, I really need to use it and here's why, for example. So each side really does need to be open, I think, and to respect the other's experience, right? And what they're bringing to the table, because both bring great things and often different things. And that's what makes it such a useful thing to do, right? It makes it so useful. So I would offer that as advice to anyone. The other bit of advice I would say is similar to what Mike was saying about, you know, engage and come to the table with your ideas, etc. Also, don't be afraid to highlight where you feel, you know what, I need a bit of extra support here. I need a bit of training here, or here's where I'd like to build some capacity, etc. I would also suggest that sometimes from a researcher side of things, you know, we do this work for so long, we may use language or methods or whatever the case that are so old hat to us that may be brand new to you, and we may not realize that. So again, it gets back, I think, to communication, right? To being transparent and willing to respect each other's expertise, and to talk about whatever it is, good or bad, sort of thing. I think that's good advice too, I think.
Yeah, no, for sure. Let's take this final question then. So let's think about the future. What do you think the future of patient engagement in health research is in Canada?
Oh, you go, Mike. That's a nice, easy question.
That's an easy one. No problem. I'll just look at the crystal ball and I'm all set. For me, if I was to look to the future based on the experience I have to date, and that's based on what I've learned through NL support and the PAC, and attending workshops and conferences and summit and working with Holly on projects, is that I think the future looks bright. I think that patient partners and PACs across Canada are showing that they add value and to research and healthcare generally. And the only other comment I'll make, and it's a closing comment for me, is that as Lisa Ridgway, who was recently on the PEP Talks, said that, and I agree with this, that you know, patient partners will claim their space in Canadian healthcare. And I truly believe that.
That's a great quote. I can't possibly come up with something that good. Thanks, Mike.
I thank Lisa.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. No, look, I agree. I think that SPOR as a strategy really has galvanized now thinking, talking, debating, etc., networking opportunities and so on, to think about patient engagement, to help define it, to help provide tangible examples of what it looks like. I mean, this very podcast is a result of that, right? Is one of the examples of that. So in really, when you stop and think about it, in the course of just 5 or 6 years, quite a bit of work has been done, I think, actually. And as Mike said, there are advisory councils now across the country, and those members are connecting with each other, which is great as well. So I think it does look very bright. I'm very pleased that we have the promise of a phase 2 that gives us a little bit more time, because culture change does take time. And I'm glad that the funders have recognized that and are giving us that bit of opportunity. But I think we've laid excellent foundations. SPOR itself has now created many of the structures, i.e. the units, for example, across the country that will really help, I think, move it forward. But it's exciting. It was exciting to be involved from the beginning, and I really look forward to seeing what this looks like 5 years down the road. So, Paul, you'll have to invite us back in 5 years. We'll
for sure. But thanks so much to both of you for coming on the podcast today.
Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Paul, for your interest.
Thanks so much for joining us for this episode of PEP Talks, the Patient Engagement Podcast. Brought to you by the Alberta Strategy for Patient-Oriented Research Patient Engagement Team. Special thanks to Paul Ferry, Sadia Ahmed, and Sandra Zielinski, and our summer students Sarah, Sydney, and Stella for their co-production. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast wherever you found it, and we hope you'll join us again for more interesting discussions about patient engagement in health research and healthcare.